Good morning, everybody. My name is Julian Kesselman. I'm the founder of startBUILD and also the program director of RealTechX. And I'll be facilitating today's session on the future of smart buildings with the support of a great lineup of speakers today. So for those of you that have been members of the startBUILD community for a long time, welcome. Some of you will have been there when we launched the group about 18 months ago. From then, we grew from about 30 people having beers and pizzas to now a network of 1,500 people around Australia and then also into the Asian region. We've invited all of the different member groups, so Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth, with over 1,500 members and have a few hundred people registered for today's event. And I'm very pleased to say that there's a lot of new faces as well. So I think today's event, we're seeing a lot more industry representation, which is fantastic. Really, the purpose of startBUILD is to provide a platform for emerging technology businesses in the real estate and property space to engage with each other, to form networks, and then of course to engage with industry so we can get good solutions out there to start to make change. And so we're hoping that that's what today's session does bring about. startBUILD is also proudly supported by RealTechX, which is the innovation program that I'm the program director of. RealTechX is a subsidiary of the venture capital firm Taronga Ventures, who's an institutionally backed investment business that invests in technologies like some of the panelists that you'll hear from today. So switch automation, Cognian and Calimino, those types of companies that are making an impact in the built environment. The program works with companies like the ones that you'll be hearing from, as well as corporates like Lendlease, Dexus, ISPT, Australian Unity, and PGIM out of Singapore, and fundamentally looking to drive implementation. So not just the creation of technologies, but actually the impact and the follow through from those technologies in the real world. So for this session, for all of you that have signed in, you are participants, right? In terms of being on a Zoom webinar, which means you'll have your audio and video off. So fortunately, you can allow the kids and dogs to run wild in the background, but you are still participants and we want you to engage in the session. And there's a couple of ways in which you can do that. First and foremost, indulge your curiosities by asking our speakers questions. So over the next 90 minutes, we're going to hear from 4 speakers. Each of them will talk for about 10 minutes about the origins of their company, the solution that they brought to market, and really the relevance of their solution in the current climate and the future of smart buildings. And I know that that's going to evoke questions for each of you. So with those questions, I'd encourage you to use the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of your Zoom. Put your questions in there anytime during the talks or question time, and I'll field those questions to the speakers on your behalf. The second way in which you can engage is by answering polls. So I'll launch the first poll in just a second. It's a really useful way to get a temperature check on the audience's opinion on what's being said, where they think smart buildings are currently and what the future is going to look like. And so we'll launch one after every speaker, and you can indulge your curiosity to find those results. And then lastly, use the chat function, right? So the chat is there, it's open, share comments, ideas, relevant links to articles and content that speaks to today's session. And the simplest way to get underway with that is introduce yourself. So usually these would be face-to-face events where we can have a drink and swap a business card, but we need to see who's out there. So please, tell us who you are, where you're from, and perhaps why it was that you've joined today's session. We're going to be recording the webinar and posting that to our YouTube channel afterwards, and so that record will be there going forwards. So I'll start off with our first poll just now. So everybody's welcome to vote, including our panelists. And we'll use this as a really basic barometer on where you think smart buildings are right at the moment. And then perhaps by the end of the session, if there's a slightly different view on that. So I'll launch the poll. Feel free to dive in and answer the question, and I'll revisit the results in just a second. Great. So a little context on today's session. All of us are really dialing in from home. couple of people perhaps in the office, but mostly you're dialing in from your kitchen table or your home office or the bedroom, or if you're lucky, perhaps out in the backyard. And we're all thinking, well, when are we going to get back into work, right? Most of our meeting rooms look like this right at the moment. So what are the next few months going to look like in helping us get back in this constrained environment of lockdowns and social distancing? And this is not just a question on the minds of all of us as workers and other participants in the economy, but also on the minds of all major landlords, right? They want their tenants back in a safe and secure way. And some of the most pressing challenges that are happening, I guess, right at the moment are pretty simple, right? So it's around hygiene. So how do you make sure that there's enough hand sanitizer and that tables are cleaned daily, and that tools that we use regularly like mice and keyboards are deep cleaned so that there's no contraction through those devices. And then the next kind of big question is, well, how do you run a meeting, right? So do you sit everybody at the table? Do you have half as many people? That might be a blessing for some meetings, knowing how they tend to run. But how do you actually move around the office and engage with your colleagues in a safe way in this climate? And then there's a really, really simple challenge, which all real estate operators are facing at the moment. How do you actually get people in the buildings? Because of course, the big pinch point that everybody's experiencing is lifts, right? So lifts are designed to obviously move large swathes of people at peak hours into the building and at lunchtime. Think back into the normal times when you're in the lunch hour rush and you're going down to the bottom and you're cramped about a dozen people in the lift. How uncomfortable is that? Now put a COVID overlay on that and it's somewhat horrifying, right? And so lifts are, with social distancing of 1.5 meters, and only being able to take 2 people at a time is a real problem. And in today's Australian Financial Review, we actually saw Australia's largest landlord in the commercial space, Dexus, the head of their commercial portfolio, Kevin George, talking about how at their headquarters at Australia Square in downtown Sydney, a building which usually houses 2,500, 2,800 people, it may take up to 3 hours with the current protocols to actually get people in the building, right? Which, you can imagine the queues that are kind of stretching out the street. But they also did talk about, they ran a survey with their tenants about when they expect people to be going back. And there was some results of, what the next few months look like. So, they're expecting that about 23% will come back in May this month, about 43% in June, 50% in July, and 71% in August, right? So we are seeing this gradual ramp up as we've got these new operating models and protocols for going back into offices safely, right? But that's for the here and now and dealing with this very current crisis, right? And coronavirus really came out of nowhere for many of us, and we were entirely unprepared. So for today's talk on the future of smart buildings, it's really looking ahead beyond those simple protocols, right? And thinking about the future, right? And so this is the central question that we've posed to each of our speakers. So how can smart buildings help to protect tenants and occupants against future threats? The coronavirus came out of almost nowhere, right? And we were entirely unprepared. What will the next pandemic look like, right? What about other types of social risk? What about climate change, right? So how do we turn the brick and mortar assets that we have currently into much more dynamic and responsive offerings to keep tenants and occupants safe, secure, and give them that peace of mind such that they can get back into space? And so really all of our speakers will talk to this central question and about how their solution adds to a robust technology stack to build resilience. So let me end the poll now. I'll share the results with each of you. So the question was, how smart is the building where you typically work? Outside of lockdown, of course, right? Does it have no smart technology, some smart technologies, lots, true smart building? I have no idea, right? So like looking at these results, more than half think you have some smart technologies, but I guess that would suggest that there's huge capacity, right, to uplift the overall technology stack in all sorts of domains. And what you'll hear from our speakers today is the infrastructure that's required to make that happen, and also a couple of the key use cases which can add to the plethora of smart technologies which are coming through right at the moment. So with that, what I might do is introduce each of our speakers, and it's a pleasure to have all of them addressing you today. So Mark Bloom from Cognion Technologies is a participant in our RealTechX program, along with Matt from Calumino and Deb from Switch. Has been a very eager participant right from the outset. Cognion is a infrastructure layer technology that actually enables smart devices to connect through to the building. And I'll let Mark tell you a little bit more about that. Matt from Calumino has a fantastic story, and I'm not going to steal his thunder talking about it, about how they've used their thermal camera technology, which is used for monitoring people in space, to address the current crisis with respect to pre-screening for fevers as a potential symptom of the virus. Anthony and Edgar from Igloo Home were very, very pleased that they could join us. Not members of the RealTechX program, but members of another program, Reach. Anthony's based out of Singapore and has been a real contributor to building the Singaporean RealTech ecosystem, right? So much like startBUILD over here. So it's a pleasure to have you on board. And Edgar is based out in Australia as his Chief Commercial Officer. So Igloo Home does more than just homes. It does homes, but also commercial premises as well, and provides smart locks, which provide intelligent access control into our buildings, which obviously is a key risk point. And then lastly, very, very pleased to introduce Deb Nola from Switch. So Deb has been an affiliate of our ecosystem for a long time, and really a leading voice in smart building technology. Switch Automation provides a data platform which allows owners and operators to make sense of all the deluge of data which we're able to pull from traditional building systems, and also new beacon sensors and other feeds as well. So really, providing the insight into how to operate smart buildings more effectively. So it's a pleasure to have all of our speakers with us today. As I said, each of the speakers will talk for about 10 minutes. While they're talking, I would encourage you, please indulge your curiosities, put your questions in the Q&A, and I'll address them and manage them with the speakers as we go. So that's enough for me. First up off the rank is Mark Bloom from Cognion Technologies. As I said, Mark was one of the most enthusiastic applicants to our RealTechX program. We sent him a participation agreement just to review, and he came back with it signed in triplicate before the program had even begun. He's been a great participant, and I think is providing a really critical piece of infrastructure in enabling our smart buildings future. So with that, I'll stop the screen share and hand over to you, Mark.
Thanks very much for that kind introduction there, Julian. And yes, we are delighted at Cognion to be part of the program. I hope everyone can see my screen now.
Yep, we can.
Yep. Okay, excellent. So look, we're certainly in a changed world. The fact that this panel session is being done as a webinar rather than face-to-face shows the changes. But look, I'm going to talk about some of the technologies, but really what we're talking about here is these technologies and technological changes were all happening. What we're seeing in the current environment, though, is how the technologies that are out there are being accelerated, and in some cases being used to slightly different use cases, but the technology were happening anyway. And of course, the smart buildings is just one example. And I've got some quotes up there that I'd like you guys to be having a look at. Just a quick bit of personal background beyond what Julian said. I come from an IT&T background. I was part of the startup team at the carrier AAPT. And before I co-founded Cognion, I was at Cisco, where I looked after Cisco's IoT innovation centers. So very much involved with technology, and have been excited to see how technology can be applied to the built environment and the lessons learned out of the IT&T space. Firstly, I'd like to say that, as I said, the technology's been moving anyway. There was a start in the smart building space focusing on, if you like, efficiency and energy efficiency, then sustainability and how that related, and of course, carbon neutrality and how critical that is for climate change and mitigating that. But the real move of great interest to me and to Cognian has been the human-centered nature, how to make our buildings more human-centered and a focus on health and well-being. So you can see that these technologies that were emerging, for example, Cushman and Wakefield deploying beacons for social distancing, a lot of other social distancing applications that are critical to get people back to the office, as Julian was talking about. And even other technologies such as contactless access, which were previously around the human experience and making things seamless and easy, actually play into health and safety, because people don't want to touch the buttons, touch the doors in the same way that they were before. But I think the most important quote overall is the one in the bottom corner: the virus will pass, right? But the focus on health and well-being and making our buildings safe and human-centered doesn't. It's just focused our minds. So what sort of technologies will increase that safety and well-being? Well, firstly, as I said, there's always been a focus on it. We have the World Building Standards, very important part of what happens in our spaces. And there's increasingly going to be more and more compliance monitoring around that. And technology plays a role in that, much better than it being manual. And then Julian mentioned cleaners and cleaner audits, environmental air quality, which I'll talk about, and then very much in the press, contact management and social distancing. So what do some of those things mean with technology? So assuming you have the right infrastructure in your building, an interesting 50% or 57% with somewhat smart buildings, if you have a smart canopy and smart infrastructure in your building, you can start to offer a whole lot of amazing services. And I'll focus firstly on this healthy side, the cleaner audits. Providing a Bluetooth tag, for example, to your cleaners, and you can then monitor where they've been, how long they've stayed, which is really important for to be able to show that the duty of care has been adopted and that we're properly ensuring our desks, toilets, etc. are clean. But it's even more than that aspect of safety. You'll see on that little picture there of the tag, it's got a panic button. So you can also provide safety for your staff, in this case, cleaners or security people, so that you know where they are if there's an emergency. Social distancing, if you've got a tag or a phone on the app. And by the way, because for social distancing, you don't need to know who it is, you just need to know someone is there. It's got very strong privacy pieces. But now you can start to report on how your space is being utilized, how many people per square meter, which areas are okay to enter and are not. And this comes on the back of what was previously being done purely for space optimization and workplace efficiency. But it's how technology evolves if you've got the right interfaces to be able to offer this. And contact tracing, COVID safe, obviously a lot of press around that. Well, what happens inside your building? How do you remove some of the false positives or indeed false negatives? False positives like between neighboring tenancies, even neighboring floors where you're actually not in contact. Or even more to the point, it's not just about whether you're close to an infected person, it's also if an infected person touched something and you were maybe an hour or two later in that same space, there's a risk. How do you measure that? With a smart building and with a smart infrastructure and canopy in place, you can cover that. Environmental sensors, always been important. Having more and more of those throughout your building, you're able to better cater for the comfort, quality, well-being of the occupants. And temperature, humidity is obviously very important, but also CO2. It's not just about global warming. CO2, in fact, impacts performance, and it can vary on parts on the floor. And what I want to really draw attention to with all this COVID piece, So let's not forget the recent bushfires that we've had. And unfortunately, with climate change, we're likely to see more and more of those sorts of issues and emergencies. Air pollution, critical, outdoors, but also indoors. How do you know the quality within your building? How are you exercising the right duty of care to the occupants? How do you make sure the airflow is right and that the filtering is right? So measuring those particulate matter, very, very important. Other features like contactless access I spoke about, but what's really, really critical to create that true smart building is that we don't have just separate siloed approaches, that we've got the ability for different technologies to interwork with each other and grow and adapt. And other things include things like lighting control. I've mentioned how space utilization reporting has actually been updated to provide social distancing. And you want the flexibility to be able to do things like that. HVAC systems, BMS integration. Why can't your BMS control your lights? Why do you need a separate lighting system? All these things interworking together so that you get the right control, insights, and features as the building adapts, as usage changes. And that's really where Cogni and Synchromesh comes in, where we're an IoT technology, we're an enabling technology, where we connect the physical world of sensors and actuators to the digital world of control, intelligence, and insights. And that's where the real power of your smart building comes in. We have a solution that's for retrofits and greenfields. And we typically start with lighting because lighting is ubiquitous. It's in every building. It's required. You need it to meet, you need lighting control to satisfy building code standards. And our solution is such that it's open. You can use any light or any sensor. And we effectively put a Bluetooth beacon in every light. So you have a density. You have a density there that enables you to provide services like micro-location, connect open standard sensors, and also enables services, not just the ones I spoke about, but control from the phone, wayfinding, and energy saving, etc. So really what we provide is the central nervous system for buildings. We're delighted to be working with Delos, who are the founders of the Well Building Standard and focus on wellness real estate, because that whole area of human-centered buildings for well-being is critically important, as is sustainability. And I do want to close with that comment about partnership. The days of closed systems, one company providing everything, it's been over in other industries, and it's happening in the building technology industry as well. It's all around ecosystems. It's all around partnering, because buildings are built for decades, and trying to pick a technology winner is a risky business. But if you have open standards, collaboration, ecosystem, and partnerships, the buildings continue to evolve and grow for the future and for future demands. And it's part of why we're delighted, Julie and Sana, to be part of RealTechX and the ecosystem that you've created and brought together, that power of partnership. So thank you.
Great, Mark, thank you very much. And I think a really relevant technology to kind of kick us off today, given the role that you play as that kind of open connector.
Thank you.
Look, we'll turn for a couple of questions now. What I'll do first is launch a poll around Cognian. So I'll run that for a couple of minutes and then share the results and get Mark's reflections. Paul Tune has shared a question, which I'll ask in just a second, and I invite everybody else to log their questions in the Q&A. What I might actually start with, I'd love to dig a little bit deeper, Mark, on, I guess, an open architecture. So when you think about the future of smart buildings, why is the openness of the architecture so important?
Okay. Thanks for asking that. Firstly, no one company can provide all the answers. And I've seen that at Cisco, and I've seen that with others. You want to have an ecosystem. How do you do that? The best way is an open standard.
Mm.
So new sensors and new technologies are emerging all the time. If you've got standards and open approach, you can connect them. And also, it's not just about the sensors and the edge devices. Or one of the things I didn't mention, which is really important to Synchromesh, is how we interface to the digital world using standards, whether it's Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud Platform, or Amazon, for example. And those platforms have a whole series of applications that sit in there. You want to open up to the brilliance of probably the innovators that are on this WebEx, this web call right now, who are building new applications. What you want to do is you want to provide the data to those applications so that they can build and new applications, new approaches, and provide new insights. And you don't do that unless it's open. It's very much like what was achieved with the App Store on the smartphone. We need the same thing, the App Store for smart buildings.
Yeah, most definitely. And yeah, philosophically, we're big believers in that. You do need to kind of stand on each other's shoulders to make this happen. It's a very big endeavor. I think we've exhausted the poll, so I might share the results and get your reflections on that. So I'm ending the poll now and sharing the results. So the question was, which smart feature would you most like to see enabled in your office building? And perhaps unsurprisingly, right in the current climate, it's around environment control, so indoor air quality and compounds, and also people monitoring, are people observing, I guess, protocols that have been set out by our various governments. I guess what reflection I would like to get from you is you start with smart lighting as the integration point. So why start with smart lighting as the enabler of these other kinds of features?
So yeah, great to see that poll, and I would agree. Look, smart lighting is effectively, it's almost a hygiene factor now. You have to have it in your buildings, right? It's a given. You won't meet BCA compliance unless you have it. So because it's a given, why we start is because it's a given. Everyone needs it. So it's ubiquitous, you put it in there, but it's not a different, well, the way we do it wirelessly is a differentiator. The fact that it's open is a bit of a differentiator, but fundamentally the requirement, it's just a must have. And that's why we typically start there, because it's a must have. But what's down there is smart environment control and the people monitoring. Yeah, interesting. We would agree wholeheartedly. And it's not just, that obviously you need temperature and CO2 and all these pieces there. But in your typical existing building that's wired, how do you put more temperature sensors or CO2 sensors and bring it back to the smarts? It's impossibly difficult. It's very costly. And that's where wireless fits in. And that's where having a ubiquitous platform, which we call the smart canopy, enables that to happen. So you can connect all those different sensors very simply, cost effectively to the network to provide that. And really, that's what it's about. You want to have it so that you provide an infrastructure that makes it very much like the IT world. You can turn services on and off, add services as and when you need them, when your tenant needs them, when the tenant or occupant sees value. If they don't see value, you don't provide it. Why put the cost in the first place? But the lighting smart canopy enables you to do that.
Yeah, most definitely. I think your answer probably speaks to a couple of the questions that have come through in terms of obstacles of commissioning new sensors into the system. Noting that we have other speakers to get to, I might ask you one more question and then invite you to type answers in response. So don't worry, everybody will get their questions answered. Look, there's a bit of an elephant in the room right at the moment with COVID tracing. And particularly, I put in the chat a public service announcement that I said, I hope everybody has downloaded the government's COVID Safe app, right? And obviously everybody has their own views around privacy. But look, I think I'll ask the question. So Paul Tune has said, with collection of data of building occupants via various sensors, such as employees, how do you draw the line between privacy of the occupant maintaining smart tech within the building, and I guess the impacts for safety. So what is your view on the privacy versus safety debate?
Yeah, look, firstly, philosophically, and then I'll tell you a bit technologically. I mean, philosophically, I think what we've seen is the needle or the debate has shifted more towards safety than privacy. Whereas if we were having the discussion 6 months ago, I think the needle would be in a different point. So certainly, people are accepting that there is some privacy potentially that you give up on the basis of having a safe environment and getting the economy working again. And I've heard a number of speeches, if we had time on this topic, by leading legal experts on that point. But it doesn't have to be quite so cut and dry. I mentioned briefly in my talk that, say, for social distancing, you don't need to have any knowledge about who it is. All you need to know is that there is someone there. And you can also anonymize the data, and you can have it where the user chooses whether they share their data or not. So, an example might be, you've got social distancing, totally anonymous. But if I have a fall or I'm in panic, I might want to share my identity. If I'm ordering my coffee, I might want the barista to know it's me and I like a skinny flat white with a twist of lemon. But you want to have as much choice with the user and not mandated as to what it's going to be. And technology can help you do that.
Yeah, most definitely. I'm just going to grab a quick prop. So right at the moment, I'm very, very engrossed in this book. Right. So it's about the battle for AI supremacy between China and Silicon Valley, and particularly around data availability, right? And that being a very, very powerful determinant of who's going to win this race. And so I think the question, which I might just cap off, around privacy versus safety, is also very market dependent, right? And so in very different contexts, I think that will play through in different ways.
Very true.
Look, we might stop and pause there, and thank you very much, Mark, for sharing your thoughts and kicking us off. We've had a slew of different questions, so if you wouldn't mind just jumping in the Q&A and typing in those answers, then we'll get back to everybody who's asked something. So thank you. And look, we'll share a link to Cognian and also to Mark's email if you want to reach out following. I'm sure you'd appreciate the opportunity to engage. So. Okay, look, with that, we're pleased to invite our next speaker. So Matt from Calumino. We've always been very fundamentally interested in their underlying technology. But when we first engaged with Calumino, it was for a very different purpose in the built environment. And the company has really repurposed their focus quite hard in the current environment to produce a solution which we think is really, really compelling and is going to be very important now and into the future. So Matt, I'm very pleased to invite you to address the group.
Thank you. Thanks, Julian. Thanks, Mark. That was an excellent prezo. So I will share my desktop here. Sound, share. Alrighty. So is that up on the screen?
It is. It's still in presenter mode. Yep. Perfect.
There we go. Okay, thanks guys. Hello everyone. So my name is Matt. I am Biz Dev Manager for a company called Calumino. And I'll be speaking about basically, what we were doing pre-COVID, what COVID did to our business, and how, being a small startup, we were able to, be agile and pivot and apply our technology to a new case, for the kind of foreseeable future, and how this is related, and how our technology, relates to smart buildings and protecting tenants against threats. So yeah, we are a deep tech company based in Sydney. We make a unique low-cost thermal sensor, and we develop software around this sensor to extract information from the environment. So a thermal sensor, sees heat and it does, in place of light, like a visual camera. So we basically provide new sensing capabilities and insights for smart buildings, particularly in the aged care sector, more recently for human temperature monitoring, which I'll explain, but also for surveillance, smart lighting, like what Mark was talking about, for commercial buildings, for, kind of the next wave of sensing for building management and control. So you can see the GIF down below. This is just a quick example of human tracking, fall detection using our algorithms, so human counting, and there's also hotspot tracking. One of those people is carrying a hot coffee, so we can. That's kind of like a simulation of fire detection, fire locating in buildings, and those kind of things. So yeah, our focus pre-COVID was it's a platform technology, so different verticals, but the two main focuses were aged care and smart buildings. So working with companies in the smart building space for like, new smart lighting, which can, both control lighting, but other building components. So you've got autonomous building controls, you've got people tracking for energy saving, for controlling HVAC, space optimization with the people tracking piece. You've got life safety, to be able to detect fires and people at once. And then for retail industries, you've got customer journey, so heat maps of where people are. And so interestingly, as Mark spoke, we were working with a very big US company called Acuity Brands on a new kind of generation of lights, because lights are inherently a mesh structure in a lot of buildings, so they create a really good platform for having sensors, having like a new pair of eyes to extract data from the environment. I'll quickly go through Eve Care just to set the scene. So Eve Care, is a smart building solution to protect the elderly. Essentially, you use our thermal sensors, which are low res, so privacy non-intrusive in this case. So for instant fall detection and well-being monitoring for the elderly and those who need care. And so basically you install it in the corner of the room or above on the ceiling, similar to a PIR sensor, so for like a security system. But there's about 500 pixels, so there's information. There's enough data to get detect falls and detect if people are in their bed or in the ensuite, but not enough information in this case to invade privacy. So you can see there, an example installation of our thermal hardware, and then you can see on the right, there's an example of a fall being detected, and so this information is then connected to, wirelessly or via, power over Ethernet to our dashboard environment, or to integrate into a nurse call system. So, nurses at a glance can see who's in their room, who's in their bed, which rooms are empty, are their visitors present? So it kind of creates this extra dimension of care. And then when you amalgamate kind of the metrics, which are simple, independently, so in the ensuite or are they in their bedroom, or have they gotten up during the night many times? I mean, obviously fall is a very obvious kind of first order metric, but the other ones, so yeah, how if there's been in their ensuite too many times overnight, so you can kind of amalgamate this data over time, and healthcare professionals can use this to say, for example, detect deteriorating health. So that's kind of how we were using our solution for to create a new kind of wave of smart buildings for the elderly and like aged care facilities to protect the occupants. So beginning of March, COVID-19 kind of began to put basically our whole business on hold. So our main aged care customer, we were doing a full facility rollout in March, and that was put on hold at the time indefinitely. Unfortunately now we're going to start that installation in the second half of this year. So, but that was essentially put on hold. And then, our B2B smart building and lighting and controls customers slowed down, their work slowed down, and we kind of stopped the product integration side of things there. So we had a really unsure future, beginning of March, and we had to rethink our focus. So we knew we had certain capabilities, and they were, the focus was more on the spatial information. So, people counting, people detection and tracking. But one thing we were sure our sensor could do was human temperature monitoring, and really quite accurately. But we hadn't really kind of done the full prototyping and kind of research into how good this could be. So what we Yeah, so we found another focus, right? So everyone would know now that fever is the #1 symptom of COVID and for other, strains of virus. And you can use thermal image, use thermal sensors to detect someone's facial temperature, which is an indication of a raised body temperature. And this can be used as a very quick, safe and effective way of screening people who may have an elevated temperature, which may mean that, they're ill. Yeah, so existing solutions around this, there's basically fall into two buckets. So there's thermal imaging, and they're typically very expensive, high resolution. They're quite cumbersome. They require a trained technician to operate, and that limits the kind of installation environment. And the other option is manned thermometer guns. And so these are quite inaccurate, they're ineffective. They often use industrial grade, kind of cheap guns, which can't accurately measure temperature. They require a full-time worker. Yeah, so social distancing isn't maintained and they can be quite invasive. So we're trying to kind of find a better solution than what is currently available. So what we had to do, obviously, during lockdown, so during kind of the peak of it all in Australia was, we bootstrapped prototyping, design and manufacture. So, we had a climate chamber for calibration that was actually a shed we built from Bunnings. We have our head of product there in the middle of the slides in his garage doing, testing and calibration. And then we had, an optics, our optics lab kind of broken down and moved to another engineer's spare room. For kind of the month that we were rapidly getting this product together. So we spent about a month designing, prototyping, validating, testing, and then we began to manufacture a highly accurate temperature screening device that has excellent accuracy and excellent stability thanks to our technology. And it is what we call the rapid thermo screener. So I've just inserted here a little excerpt from the
It has been designed to be a frontline protection.
So this will just kind of gives a quick explanation of the product in its completed form.
For populated spaces like hotels, airports, nursing homes, schools, and office buildings. Using the latest innovation in passive IR technology, the device scans a person's face accurately in less than a second. The system is plug and play and easy to use. It is fully automated, does not require any specific training, and is small enough to sit on a reception desk or countertop. The operation could not be any simpler. As a person approaches the device, they will see an image of themselves on screen. Once the face is detected by the AI, within a fraction of a second, the thermal sensor reads a person's temperature. The pre-screen is fast, safe, and reliable with no physical contact required.
So yeah, and then we put this video together to show the product in use. So that was basically from first week of March to the end of March, we had a fully finished product ready to go. And started to deploy in different built environment, different spaces, commercial buildings, aged cares, we've got mining sites in Australia, international airports are starting to use the devices. So that was awesome. I mean, we were luckily able to pivot and move super quickly and came up with this kind of useful device to help, protect, basically as a frontline protection for our spaces and, to protect occupants. And so we thought, we were had gotten to an excellent solution, but quickly after, this was still, just as this is kind of finished development, we then started working with another Sydney-based company called NoahFace, who have an excellent facial recognition system that uses an iPad with their kind of face detection AI for contactless building access control and, time and attendance for workers and students. So they already had this excellent system that would kind of very quickly identify people entering a space. And, we met and very quickly came up with a solution where we've turned the RTS into a module that is integrated with NoahFace's access control. And then, so, as people enter new spaces and enter rooms, they can have their temperature screened very quickly. And it can identify that they can work as an access control system in unison. And so this is kind of the evolution of the RTS, in an you know, from the end of March to we are now into this fully integrated smart building solution. Yeah, and I'll just to finish off, I'll show you just a video to give you a good idea of this solution in its kind of final form.
The smartest facial recognition system for business has now been boosted with a rapid thermal screener. The ease of secure hands-free access can now also screen temperature. In under 1 second, an elevated temperature will inform the person attempting to enter and instantly trigger an email alert to notify key stakeholders. The safety of students and teachers can be instantly enhanced with iPad kiosks set up within the school, performing roll call and temperature checks without the need for extra staff duty. And with the efficiency of NoahFace's time and attendance system comes the added workplace safety of thermal detection. That's 24/7 unmanned peace of mind. The applications are endless. It's scalable and easy to set up. NoahFace. Everyone deserves a safe space.
Yeah, so I mean, we were super happy to get, you know, the RTS in its standalone form finished and you know, ready to start getting people back to work. And then, you know, we're super excited to have now working with NoahFace and have this kind of seamless product as, you know, kind of, at least for the near future, a solution to get people back into their, you know, into the built environment, into their spaces safely and seamlessly. Yep, so that's all.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, Matt. I truly think it's an incredible story. You know, I don't know what everybody else on this call was doing during the month of March, but you guys could turn around a product in that month and have actually managed to achieve, you know, the secondary integration POC with NoahFace in the month following is just probably for the corporates on this call astounding to see those cycles.
Yeah, I mean, you guys know, I mean, we've been in contact the whole time. It was a real slog, but you know, it was very, you know, inspiring to, you know, have a defined goal and work on something new and find out, you know, that our technology really has an excellent fit to a very kind of, at least for the time being, a very necessary thing to get on top of.
Yeah, most definitely. Look, I'm just about to launch a poll for everybody that will read in a couple of minutes, which again touches on that kind of privacy versus safety debate. So we'll revisit those results once you've answered. Look, I guess the first question for me, I'd like to go back to some of the internal discussions that you guys were having at Calimino, thinking about the shift from aged care into fever screening, right? So it's a pretty hard pull on the brakes, given you were actually basically going into production for all the Eve Care products.
Yep.
And there's a lot of other founders that are on the call who no doubt have had to have similar kind of very hard right turns in strategy in just a very short space of time. So give us a bit of a sense of the discussion that happened within Calimino's management.
Yeah, I mean we never, it wasn't that it looks like we threw all of effort into it, but, and we weren't sure of the window of opportunity, how big it was going to be, but, we did see a hard stop with our aged care business. And as I said, that was indefinite. So we wanted to kind of hedge our bets and see what we could do. And we'd always, at heart, we're really interested in our technology and what it can do. And we've always wanted to validate how, it's super high accuracy temperature capabilities, with the proper calibration. And so it was kind of the right time to jump at that solution. And we knew we could get something done very quickly. And we knew that Eve Care would come back online. We just weren't sure when. And we had time to kind of throw everything into a new application because it is a platform technology. We kind of had all the right pieces. We just got our new head of product who's come to us from another thermal hardware company overseas, and he's very on top of this new work we're doing. So it was kind of, it was like a night, it seemed like a nightmare at first, I'm sure for everyone, but then it kind of felt like the right thing to do at the time. So it was a bit of a huge silver lining kind of endeavor. Yeah.
Yeah, it's brilliant where you guys have got to. So look, I might turn to a question from Vito. So he's asked about the RealTechX corporate partners and pilots, and unfortunately that's kind of commercial discussions that are going on. But perhaps you could give a sense of some of the pilots that you are running with the RTS device, and following Simon Hayes has asked about your sales pipeline, where's been the biggest uptake? So what does the next few months look like for you guys in terms of a rollout and implementation perspective?
Yeah, I mean, so we're super focused. So we do have many kind of dispersed customers with the standalone RTS, but I mean, it's an excellent solution, and it was the quickest way to market because it's a standalone device. You simply plug into a tablet or a computer, and which runs the software. But now we're super focused on the OEM integration, so the module integration, and you know, the most kind of evolved example of which is NoahFace's product, the access control solution. So we're really looking to move probably further away from the standalone device, which is how we could get that highly accurate device out as quickly as possible, and look into integrating to existing solutions. So, you know, airport kiosks is another thing we're looking at. So these access control devices, so things like so kind of integrating into existing, access control solutions would be the kind of the way we're moving now, because as well it feels like, you know, and speaking to clients and to people in this industry for a lot longer than us, they're seeing that this what we call a temperature credential for people entering spaces is probably here to stay a lot longer than we originally thought. It's not just, you know, a small kind of, you know, this will pass, as Mark has mentioned, and so have you, Julian, but typically sometimes with crises, you get certain protocols in place that tend to hang around for a lot longer. And, you know, on a world level, this will hang around for a long time. So we're working towards more integrated solutions where, you know, these temperature credentials can become kind of a seamless part of checking in and out of spaces.
Yeah, most definitely. So you've got a couple of questions around production capabilities and also offers to distribute the product. So
yeah,
okay, good to see that. I might allow you to deal with those directly after.
cool.
But let me just, I'll end the poll and then kind of end with one more question. So the question was, how comfortable would you feel to undergo a thermal scan when checking into a building, right? And so you've got kind of 44% saying quite comfortable, and everyone else around the 20% mark. So what I'd like to get your final reflections on is, you know, the results of that poll, and I guess which context you think that the comfort will be higher, and, you know, and so where will it become a kind of standard protocol?
So I think I mean, I'll be first to admit we've had a lot of discussion with customers and other people about, you know, privacy intrusion. It's very obvious, especially when you're now coupling the temperature credential with face recognition. But there are many people that are really looking for this solution that already use facial recognition for access control and, you know, time and attendance, and putting a face to a name essentially for, you know, also space utilization and kind of automated building control. So I think with those customers, adding the temperature credential doesn't seem to be too much of a friction point. I mean, it's very important to, you know, for data and information management that, you know, it stays internal, and, you know, so there's a lot of talk about how that data will be, you know, kind of handled from an infrastructure point of view. So you know, there can be a closed system where it doesn't actually go to the cloud or anything like that, just an internal kind of system. But look, it is certainly kind of a polarizing topic, and I guess there's just kind of education around it that needs to be done. And I guess we're seeing changes to legislation in some countries with some people we're speaking to, where, you know, for the foreseeable future there'll be a change with kind of, you know, the privacy legislation you have to adhere to for these kind of things. So I guess we're taking it on a case-by-case basis, and just dealing with people who understand that it's maybe more important to extend this kind of level of privacy for the greater good kind of thing. Yeah,
most definitely. I mean, I have no doubt that, you know, it's the typical adoption curve, and there's going to be those higher risk contexts, and you know, probably you guys will be very busy supporting that backlog of demand. So So I might invite you to answer the rest of the questions in the chat privately. So Matt will get back to those of you guys who've asked some more technical questions.
Sure.
And then thank you once again, and
No
we
worries.
might move on to our next speakers.
Cool.
Great. So look, it's my pleasure now to introduce both Anthony and Edgar from Igloo Home to share details around really what role they think their smart lock solution can play in all the different areas of our built environment in terms of making smarter buildings safer. And again, it's just great to be collaborating with people that have been instrumental in building the ecosystem over in Singapore. We hope that those connections can extend to our companies and then flow back the other way. It's really great to have you guys on board.
Sounds good. Thanks, Julian. Thanks, Julian, from RealTechX, as well as Santa as well, for inviting Igloo Home here today to share a little bit more about our story, as well as how we see smart access will become commonplace in the future. And of course, building off the sharing from Mark from Cognian, as well as Matthew from Clumino, great presentations and great sharing about the ideas about how smart buildings will be. We will add on from our perspective about how smart locks can also play in an entire ecosystem of smart buildings in the future. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, is this clear?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. All right, so let me begin. So hi everyone, thanks for joining us here today. My name is Anthony. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Igloo Home. And we have today with us Edgar. Edgar is our Chief Commercial Officer, running our entire business development sales team across the world. And I think we're also joined by Scott, who is our local representation over in Australia, out from Melbourne as well, very near where Edgar lives. So I'm in Singapore, Edgar is in Melbourne today. And from Singapore, we are pretty happy that we are quite close to the country being opening up. But it's also a very timely reminder, as the government gave a speech last night, sharing that as we open up the country, it's important that all the different buildings are being fit up with the relevant trace together kind of application, as well as contact tracing solutions, so that we all can have a safe kind of work environment. As back to what Mark shared, is all about people centricity. I think it's the same for us. Let me take the first couple of minutes just to share a little bit about why we started Igloo Home and how it began. And then I'll let Edgar talk a little bit more around how we're doing the deployments in all the markets that we are working on today. Yeah. So Igloo Home started about almost 5 years ago now, in August 2015. So at the point in time, my background is in data analytics and data science. So I was working in Singtel, very similar to Optus over in Australia. And so what we were doing is actually we were doing mobile phone tracking, right, through the Singtel network, much like how the trace together or the tracing solutions work today. But at the point in time, I had a spare property in Singapore where I was renting out on Airbnb, and that was when Airbnb was still kind of gray area in Singapore. It wasn't completely illegal, which it is right now here today. And that was kind of making me some money. And so I thought it was nice, maybe I should do more of Airbnb and get introduced to the whole thing about the home sharing market. And so, I mean, the biggest problems at the point in time, as many people know, is granting access to the guests without you being around, because passing keys is such a big pain point. And so, that was kind of the birth of the genesis of Igloo Home back in late 2015. And so together with a couple of partners, we came together and started designing smart lock solutions that you can install on your door, and you can remotely grant access to anyone to allow them to come in, without you being around. And the first use case was really with Airbnb. So we started from the Airbnb market in Singapore and over in the US. And in fact, one nice story is that we actually moved over to Sydney to do a pilot with Airbnb in early 2016, where we got about 50 to 100 hosts, to try out our products before we started doing a global launch with Airbnb. And over the years, the markets that we have been working on has kind of shifted from vacation rental, into real estate, into smart buildings, and also the citywide development. So this flow, kind of started from a small niche market that we started with, and then it started more into a citywide development, which becomes very relevant into the discussion and the situation today, as many cities are looking to upgrade their infrastructure into something that's contactless, without people passing keys around, because keys ultimately are unhygienic, and they lack traceability. So today we work in over 100 different countries. Our products have been shipped globally across the US, Asia, and even many parts of Europe. We raised about $20 million from both financial investors as well as strategic investors. Many of the strategic investors include telecommunication companies like Singtel and Optus over in Australia, or Kickstart over in Philippines, Pine over in Korea with SK Telecom, and many of these telcos are trying to champion the whole thing about 5G as well as citywide development, and smart access is part of the entire strategy. Today we also work with the Seeds Capital, which is the Singapore government. So there's a lot of activities that we work with them in Singapore, with regards to infrastructure access control, smart access, which we can share a little bit more later. We also work with many of these preferred partners like Airbnb globally, Agoda over in Thailand, and Booking.com in Europe, and we are accredited by IMDA for the safety and security of the the cybersecurity features of the smart locks that we ship to the market. And I think it goes to Mark's point about the difference between safety and security, and we try to address both as much as we can by getting relevant certifications. As Julian shared at the beginning, we are also part of the REACH program in Australia as well as over in the US, and I think that has been really helpful for us in looking at the real estate market. So let me just start by showing a very quick 1-minute video. Just 1 second here. Sorry, my laptop is jamming up. Okay, here we go. Hi, at
To share your screen.
let me go back to sharing it, yeah.
No problem.
Yeah. All right, here we go.
Home, we've designed a whole range of smart door locks, padlocks, and key boxes to help consumers and businesses manage their properties in a simple, safer, and smarter manner.
Our key box can help you achieve a hassle-free property showing, leasing, and rental experience because we eliminate the pain out of key exchanges. On the mobile app, you can remotely generate time-sensitive access codes in which your guests and visitors can use without the need to download their own copies of the app. Beyond that, also have the ability to mount them onto your walls.
With the smart key box, you can easily do other more important things. With our AlgoPin technology, you can generate new access codes for every single visit, and activity logs can give you full transparency of knowing who has entered and when. Join us as we transform the real estate industry.
Okay. Sorry for the very cheesy ending. I always cringe when I see it. So I think from what you see, really, we've designed a whole range of smart door locks and padlocks for all different kind of access requirements. So whether is it cabinets or door locks or buildings, and all of them are connected via a mobile application with easy to use enterprise dashboard. So you can know where all the locks are and where exactly you're granting access to, whether is it just a building or in a distributed access management kind of system. So what is interesting about the technology that we put into our locks is two different folds. If you realize as we go into this world where we want everything to be contactless, we are really managing access control across the citywide deployment. So in many of these citywide deployment, you tend not to get very strong Wi-Fi connection because those are really restricted to residential buildings. But in the citywide development, the citywide deployment, like if you're securing like a pump room in a building, or you're securing a rooftop access to your water tanks, or even a cell tower, you don't really get strong Wi-Fi connection. So we have two technology that we embed into our system. The first one is the AlgoPin technology. This AlgoPin technology, which was alluded to in the video, it basically allows our system to create different access codes for different, oh gosh, One second. This is, sorry, PowerPoint just crashed. Okay, let me just pull it out again one second. Okay, you know what? I think just let it come back. It will come back. All right, so that I was sharing about the two technologies that we design into our products. The first one is AlgoPin technology. It's very similar to how your banking tokens work. So our locks are able to remotely create an access code without the lock needing any connectivity to the internet at all. So this uses like a cryptography system, like your Google Authenticator or your banking token, so that you can create one-time passwords or duration passwords. So you can let like a guest in for an hour to do a viewing, or like a contractor to manage your water tanks for like 3 hours, for example. And all of this can be granted remotely without the lock needing any connectivity at all. And so the second part of it is because with all this, advent of 5G technologies and narrowband IoT connectivity, which is a technology that allows IoT devices to be connected to the cellular network with very, very low battery consumption. We have started to embed this kind of SIM cards into all our products. So this means that our locks can get an internet connection no matter where they're deployed across the country, as long as there's cellular network. So with these two kind of technologies working hand in hand, it enables us to basically roll out our products in a larger scale fashion across citywide development for smart cities. So today, Igloo Home basically has two brands that we look at, that we have in our company. The first one is Igloo Home, which is the parent brand, which is very focused on the consumer and residential vacation rental space. The other brand that we have released last year is this brand called Igloo Works. Now with Igloo Works, is much more focused on commercial real estate as well as citywide development. So the opportunities there that we are working with is really utilities companies, or telcos, or train stations, or infrastructure management companies, or even facilities management companies. So with these two brands, today we are working with over okay, PowerPoint is back. All right, I'll just avoid going to full screen. So today, with these two brands, we really go in about 100 distributors all around the world. The product is translated to more than 15 different languages, in different kinds of parts of the world to support it. And we have about 13 offices around the world. I'm based in Singapore, where it's our headquarters. We manufacture our products out from Shenzhen in China. Edgar is usually on a plane, traveling around, but because of the lockdown, he's really based in Melbourne, Australia. And also our local partner over in Australia, Scott, who is on the call here today. So let me just pass over the time over to Edgar very quickly to share, how the locks are deployed across the building and how it can be, relevant during this COVID period. Yeah, Edgar.
Thanks, Anthony. I think thank you, all of you. Just give you a quick flash of the what we're doing in terms of deployment. So in Singapore, as you know, it's already awarded the Smart City in 2019 globally, and also always in the top 5 in the world in terms of smart infrastructure and smart city. So first in deployment in Singapore, we have been using our padlock and also some of the hardware product with our module that can integrate it into hardware, which is lock. Lock is everywhere, always a key. So we basically running with that. You've got AlgoPin technology, online, offline. Offline, you can use the AlgoPin online. Permanent stuff, you can use Bluetooth, use your phone. And then we, of course, also have the NB-IoT type of product coming out, which is for major facility room, like Singtel, all the telco and cable companies, their infrastructure facility room. So we are deploying the NB type of padlock. So it's real time. Is to the narrowband network, and basically they can get instantly who can grant access, who get in there, who get out, and you can precisely grant extension of time, and also you can do a bulk delete, bulk activation as well. So we have dashboard to work on that. So that is an example for that. Like Anthony mentioned about the rooftop tank of all the apartment building water system. So we're also deploying that into that facility. And of course, there are many verticals we are going into now. Outside of Airbnb, of course, you have share work, share, co-work, co-living, short-term rental, all those things. We have a different product solution for that. Then you have enterprise, industrial application, you have different type of things that I talked about earlier. So that's really the building you saw that in front of you, that diagram encapsulate the whole facility that we can manage in a large scale. In the US, for example, we've done a very different industrial application now we're talking about. More like a property portfolio company managing many building. And in Asia, we've done a lot also in Thailand, CapitaLand, in that they are now putting up smart technology into the product. Put the lock in the first place. Immediately in the future, people can rent it out, and property management all integrated already, hospitality and all that. So that's in Japan. We've done the number 1, number 2 real estate company, Mitsui and Mitsubishi also in there. So they're using our key box, for example. They don't want to change the key. They still want to hang on to the key. So we put the key box as a smart solution for them as well. So a lot of group that we have done already in different part of the world. In the US, Keller Williams is real estate biggest brokerage company. They use our key box, a fantastic experience they have. Angel, you want to move to the next page? I think you look at the whole world point of view, we're going towards the key, mechanical key, that's going to the card, smart card, and all those things. I worked for Asa Abloy for 25 years in the industry, security industry, for my background. So having the eGoo's technology applying to small scale consumer also can have it. Like myself, I have my padlock now, smart padlock locking up my wine cellar and everything. So it's so smart. You don't have to have key anymore. And all the way to SME company, and all the way to professional real estate management, and also industrial application. So that's how wide ranging we are. We're deploying now the industry application side, huge stuff. You know, you're talking into a company that are running into 10 and 20,000 thousands of locking system. And really we are very open system also. We have integrated to API, SDK. We have our own dashboard and work it. We can also work inside your software and integrate it to help you have a total solution. So that's where we are. US is very big for us. Australia, we just deployed in some of the project very carefully because the network, NB network, is just rolling out. So a lot of people prefer NB. So that's fine. We're trying now. In US, we basically are on board into some of the big scale stuff.
Great. Again, that's fantastic to hear about, and particularly the open architecture. And thank you for sharing. It's awesome to see you guys moving across all these different verticals. Wanting to make sure that I give Deb enough time in this webinar to present as well. What I might do is throw up a poll, and then just ask you one kind of key question, which I expect is on everybody's mind. So we all can understand the utility of smart locks, right? From the convenience and the simplicity perspective, but what's the follow through, right? So now building owners are able to see the data on who's accessing and when, and control that more. What's the so what in terms of smart buildings, and particularly with respect to the kind of central question, how will the data through smart locks help building owners to mitigate risk for occupants and tenants?
Yeah, I think typically, the ROI, they come to the lot of deployment. They say, what is the return on investment? What is the privacy data? We answer all that typically, that there's not a big issue on that. It's really about the whole culture change of the company. You used to traditionally working workflow, you issue the way you issue out, you have department head, some of them sending paperwork and all that kind of thing, some of them integrated in the system. So now we come to our one, basically you change your whole workflow. You no more key anymore. You basically virtually can control. You can also use a big data analytic, for example. You can say, how come my contractor A and B, this guy is more efficient than the other, and all that kind of stuff. So you can do a lot of things in analytic as well. So we are building that business for our client now. That's really what it is all about.
Yeah. Okay. That makes good sense. Look, I'll end the poll there and publish the results. So it's a pretty simple question. How many years do we think it'll take before the majority of our buildings, so more than 50%, have smart locks? And most of the view is about 1/3 to 5 years and 1/3 to 10 years. Given this is the core of your business, I'd love to get your just quick reaction on what you see in the horizon.
Yeah, the pace is changing very quick. Consumer world, you can see a lot of people doing smart because of Amazon getting involved in Alexa and Google and all that. So myself, like my house, I haven't had key for the last 8 years. So all I carry now is my car key, like nothing else. So I can go for a run, I can do everything. I can even tell when is my kid coming back. And when is the guy walk my dog, I know exactly. I can track all that thing. So it's a lot of consumer side driving. The industrial side already happened before. I work in my company, startBUILD, we do a lot of key, then they put the key into electronic, and then they still need the key and going now with the cloud and app. But I think the technology is shifting completely different, like eGoo stuff, now eGoo work technology. It's quite new. So the adoption rate, some of the people, big company, they realize with this COVID situation, they can't grant the access. They're calling us, now they want it. So we get a lot of inquiry. People want to speed up now.
Very, very glad to hear. And I think that really is, one thing that COVID has brought about is an acceleration in the need to be able to control access and all sorts of functions remotely.
Can I just add up one point?
Sure,
I think Edgar was quite humble about his previous company because he was actually the president of the startBUILD, which is the biggest blog company globally, and he was running the whole North Asia portion. Just to give one data point, when he was there, he helped to transform Korea from 0 digital locks to 100% or 99% digital locks within 4 to 5 years. So the transition happened just so quickly within less than half a decade. And I think this pandemic, as Julian rightly pointed out, is a great catalyst for people to start thinking about data for safety, for contact tracing. And we think that this would be a very good way to help the rest of the world to adopt smart building technologies, not just smart locks, but just whole smart building technologies very quickly over the next couple of years. Yep.
That's great. Well, look, we'll, I guess, see how the results of those polls hold up now that Edgar's in Australia. So, look, thank you both so much for your time. I'm very keen to hand over to Deb Noller, who is the CEO and founder of Switch Automation. Deb was originally, is still an Australian. She spent a lot of time in the US building her business over there and has now actually relocated to Singapore as well. So, very keen to hear Deb's insights on the topic.
Thanks, Julian. Fantastic discussions from everybody. I've been involved in smart buildings for just over 10 years now, and it's always been what is going to be that catalyst that makes the market move faster. I think Mark pointed out that a lot of these technologies are not new. A lot of the things that you polled for are not new. Comfort, for example, I mean, seeing that 36% of the people that were polled would like to see smart environmental controls. There's nothing new about that. But I think, what we're seeing now is a rapid acceleration of the conversation, and it's being driven by some of these world events. And I think, the privacy and the other discussions around adoption, I think, could be different in different geographies. So I think if you look at the way Asia handled the pandemic, they didn't really care so much about privacy. They took it as a public health issue first and foremost. And so I think you'll see some geographies would adopt some of these technologies much faster than others without so much thought around the privacy, whereas other places, perhaps the US and Australia, might be a bit slower to adopt the technologies because of the privacy. But nevertheless, I think the COVID opportunity or the COVID epidemic has caused a lot of building owners and operators to stop and give pause to thought about how this smart building technologies help them to manage throughout a crisis. And one of the things that we're kind of been thinking about is that COVID will come and go. We all know this. But if you just look at the last 12 months, we had the California bushfires, which caused PG&E to shut down power regions in California for a week to 10 days at a time. That was followed very quickly by the bushfires in Australia, which was one of the biggest fire events that we've ever had. And then the Northern Hemisphere experienced Storm Dennis, which caused an enormous amount of damage. And now we're hit with COVID, which is a global event, and we've all had to think about it together, and I don't believe the saying that we're all in this together. I think some of us are in this much more deeply than others. However, it is an event that has happened to hit every single geography. So we think that with the emergence of climate change, that these crises are only going to become more frequent and perhaps even more severe, and that they're here to stay, even though COVID will come and go, that building owners and operators will have to start thinking about how they're going to bring smart building technologies into their environment and use those to manage their buildings throughout crisis. So with that, we like to think about risk, resiliency, and also remote control. So one of the things that's actually not very well known about Switch is we're actually a controls platform. So we manage large portfolios of buildings. So that could be a large portfolio of commercial real estate. For example, Oxford Properties in Canada uses Switch. But it could also be a large retail portfolio, so shopping centres or retail stores or bank branches. And when you get hit with a crisis like the pandemic, you know, the first thing that you have to think about is the safety of your team and the safety of your customers. And often that means that you can't necessarily send people out to buildings. So one of the big advantages of smart building technologies is that ability to be able to remotely control those buildings and to use data and analytics to get really good visibility into what's going on in those buildings. And there's a whole bunch of reasons that you want to do that. I mean, first and foremost, in a crisis like this, you need to be saving money as quickly as possible. So putting a building into hibernation mode immediately not only saves you money, but it does an enormous amount to protect your brand. There was quite a famous photographer who rode around his bike in Sydney at 5 a.m. one Friday morning taking photos of all the deserted streets and tweeted how come half the buildings in Sydney still had their lights on, knowing full well that nobody was coming into those buildings that day. And that's a classic example of buildings that have been unable to react in a timely manner to a crisis that was already a month in. So energy management, of course, risk mitigation, remote control, but then getting into some of the other technologies that we've seen some of the other presenters put forward, and I'm particularly convinced that Mark's got onto a winning technology there, because we're starting to see lots of building owners talk about how they're going to attract tenants and occupants back into buildings and how they're going to do that in a manner where they're convincing those tenants and occupants that everything is under control and that people can feel safe. And Dex has quoted that they're only going to have 70% of their tenants and occupants back into their buildings by August. So how would we get people back into buildings faster? And that's really around having access to data and being able to publish those KPIs. And the example that I always give for that is when you are catching a plane these days, if your plane is likely to be running late, almost certainly the airline will text you ahead to let you know that you've got a delay. They won't let you get all the way to the airport and sit in the lounge and then find out. And why? Because it makes you uncomfortable, and it also makes you feel like you're outside of your control. And it just is a much more positive customer message to let people know ahead of time. So in the same way, we believe that owners and operators will have to publish the KPIs around temperature, humidity, indoor air quality, and potentially even the number of people in the buildings and whether the utilisation and the density of those buildings is at a safe level. And we think that's going to give people confidence to get back into buildings faster, but also it will protect those leases for people that are renewing leases. And we're hearing so many conversations now around people perhaps not renewing leases for the same amount of space that they have now. They put everybody into a work from home, so maybe that trend will continue, etc. So we think that one of the key drivers for commercial owners and operators around risk mitigation is going to have to be publishing those KPIs back to their tenants. And up until now, there's always been some friction about who pays for the technology in buildings? Does the owners pay for it when the tenants are the ones that get the advantage, or do the tenants install that themselves? So we think that this is starting to align the incentives, and it should lead to an adoption of technologies into buildings faster. So smart buildings, and what are they? I'm not going to bore you with what the definition of a smart building, because everybody knows a smart building is all the systems connected, and that whole smart connected digital future that we all believe is possible. And it's 2020 and we still don't have that. And one of the things that I wanted to alert you to today is we've seen several technologies that have been talked about here today that actually, in a way, exacerbate and continue the problem, which is if you are the owner or the operator of 100 or 1,000 buildings, you already have dozens and dozens of systems to log into. And the last thing you need is yet another system to log into. So that's where Switch comes in. And what we do is we have an IoT gateway, which is called the DX Cubed. That is a standalone product. And what that does is it installs onto the network. It does an immediate digital device discovery of your network. So what that means is we plug that device in, it scans the network, it finds every system, every subsystem, every edge device, every IP address, every version of firmware, and all the known vulnerabilities. So we can basically assess within 24 hours whether a building is even ready for smart building technologies. How digital ready is that building? Once we have that building connected, we can then start pulling data and pushing that up to a cloud hosted environment where all the stakeholders in a company can access that data. And they can access a different version of that data. So for example, the facilities manager in a single building might only be able to view the controls and the analytics for that building, whereas somebody who's doing sustainability reporting across the whole portfolio, they might be more interested in looking at the energy, water, waste metrics across the whole portfolio, whereas somebody who is in the risk mitigation might be looking for density and areas of the building that have, or areas of their portfolio that have poor air quality, or maybe a virtual meter that actually calculates the temperature and humidity that creates the right environment for COVID to spread. So there's no end to the number of use cases that you can put to this, and we're certainly just part of the ecosystem. So we would work in collaboration with all of the other companies that you've seen on the webinar today. We're certainly not the edge devices, and we're not the hardware, we're not the mesh network, we're literally just the application layer that brings it all together. So just summarizing, how our belief is that, this crisis will probably come and go by the middle of next year, and we'll see something returning to something close to normal and pre-COVID. I do believe there will be some lasting consequences of this, just like 9/11 left us with security in airports that we've all come to love and accept. And we're quite happy to walk through a body scanning radar. I think that walking past a temperature sensing device that takes everybody's temperature will be no less intrusive than that, and it will be part of the risk that we all, part of the thing that we give up to alleviate the risk of this happening again. And I think there'll be some things that us as consumers, occupants and tenants of buildings will be quite prepared to give up, but I also believe that building owners and operators will be starting to look at these smart building technologies in a whole new light post July 2020, when they start to think about what's the next crisis and how do they make sure that they're completely on top of it. Yeah. So that's my talk.
I completely agree with that last point, Deb. I think 6 months ago, we couldn't have imagined the world shutting down in the way that it has, yet it has, we've adjusted to it. And so, that change process is uncomfortable at the beginning, but we do get into that new normal surprisingly easily. So look, we're due to go at 12:30. If some of you need to jump off the call, fully appreciate that, but I do want to give you an opportunity to ask Deb some questions. So if you have joined and need to jump off, thank you very much for your time. we'll be sharing a recording of this on our YouTube channel, and we'll see you again hopefully next month for the future of experience in real estate. But for now, while we still have Deb, I'd like to ask a couple of questions. First, I'll post a poll that we have is really about the impact of smart building integration, right? So what is the main driver to integrate your building and to get a system of technologies like this in place? And while people are answering that poll, I might start with a first question. You spoke about, Deb, the data standards or data transparency, and that's going to be important for a reporting function to then drive a change in behaviors. We've had a question specifically about WELL and that standard, and what is its ability to attract people back into buildings?
Yeah, so I think there's no single standard, and I think WELL is certainly one of them. I think if you look across the world, there's a number of green building standards. The US Green Building Council has LEED. There's a different one in Australia. We use Neighbours and also Green Star. And just like WELL, I think it's one of the standards. I think all of our technologies have to foster and enable standards, because who knows, we might have a pandemic standard, so our job is not to define the standards, it's simply to support them. So we see a number of different tagging standards, haystack, brick, etc. We see a number of certification standards, and our job as technologists is to be as open and transparent as possible and to support the ecosystem so that we're fostering a whole bunch of prop tech companies, but also the standards and the organizations that feed into that.
Yeah, most definitely.
I probably didn't answer that question exactly, but I think to the point, I don't think WELL is the only thing that will attract people back into building. I think it's definitely one of the things, but underlying that, you need the data. You need indoor air quality, CO2, humidity, temperature to be able to feed into that equation.
Yeah, most definitely. And I guess standards is just one of the many kind of signals that we can see that will provide us that comfort ultimately. Another question, as a kind of data integration platform, your clients would use all sorts of different kind of end devices and use their information in very different ways. What is something that you've seen from the way in which your clients are using your product to distill insights, which has kind of surprised you or has been creative or an innovative use of developing insights in this kind of current climate?
We're increasingly being looked at as a quality assurance kind of a way of attributing whether the quality assurance was met or not. So if you look at food and this could be the case with buildings if you think about indoor air quality, but right now food and pharmaceuticals, those goods have to be stored at a particular temperature in order to have an assurance that they were safe to be delivered into consumers' hands. And right now they don't necessarily have great systems for giving them the assurance that those drugs were stored at that temperature for their entire life. So we're starting to see adoption of switch by cold room storage, for example, and supermarkets to integrate their refrigeration systems so that they can get early insight into where they might have food or other kind of safety risk.
Yeah, most definitely. And we've actually seen other companies in our portfolio pivot for around the contactless provision of drugs for pharmacies as well.
Mm-hmm.
What I might do is publish the results of the poll, which is really around motivations to integrate building systems. And the question was, in your opinion, what's the main reason to integrate building systems with a platform like Switch? And so lower operational expenses, 9%, lower environmental impact, 16%, security and wellness, which is ultimately the subject of our talk today, 31%, and new insights into building operations, 44%. What are your reflections on these results, and how do you think these might have shifted, say, from 6 months ago to today and to going into the future?
Yeah, so I think, the biggest challenge that we have in the market is people are trying to find what's the reason to go through the pain of transitioning their portfolio from these big disconnected assets into that smart connected digital world. And I'm really happy to see that result, by the way, because, you know, electricity is certainly one of the KPIs that we measure ourselves by, is how much energy we save. And, you know, it's obviously a very important one because we're impact driven, but just as much impact is the number of people that we put into trucks to drive out to buildings, to spend 2 hours wandering around site and diagnosing problems, and then hopefully fixing them on the spot. But sometimes they can't because they diagnose the problem that needs either another vendor or another technician, or it needs parts that they don't have with them, or it needs, you know, additional workflow. And so when I think about digitizing real estate, it's as much around the labor and the services that are involved in real estate as it is around the actual physical buildings. So we're talking about digitizing an entire industry. So I'm really happy to see that a lot of the people that are on this webinar agree with that it's about getting the insights into the operations and understanding where are those opportunities to provide a better customer experience, a safer building, a lower operational expense. You don't know. If you're not collecting the data, you really don't understand the opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really has been, you know, kind of core to building design fundamentally. But with technologies, it's about what's the look through and how does that change the experience for occupants and you know, ultimately security for tenants. So beautiful. Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity. Loved it. Thank you.
Pleasure. So look, appreciate you allowing us all to run a few minutes over and hanging in there with us. But I think really, really important discussions, and I hope for everybody on the call, you've got a bit more of a holistic view of what smart buildings can look like into the future, and you know, ultimately how next time something like this hits, we're not going to be thrown for six in quite the same way, and we can manage with less reactively and actually be in a better position to respond deliberately. So thank you once again to all of our speakers. So Mark from Cognian, Matt from Calamino, Edgar and Anthony from Igloo, and Deb from Switch Automation. I really, really appreciate your time. I know everyone else on the call does. We've shared their contact details and web addresses. I encourage you all to reach out afterwards and also to come to our next session. So in June, we will be running another session on the future of experience. So we're going from safety, security, and wellness into, I guess, looking at how the human experience can be augmented by technologies. So we'll all send details about that later in June. So look, thank you all again for dialing in. Be safe. Be safe as you go back into your offices as well. It's going to be an interesting transition over the next couple of months. So maybe we'll look around September or October to revisit the discussion we've had today and look at what that transition has looked like. I think that could be pretty compelling. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dean. Thanks so much. Thanks, guys.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.